Let's get right to the news this morning. And the Saudi government is now claiming that Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi was killed in a fistfight in its consulate in Istanbul. And the kingdom's foreign minister calling Khashoggi's death a mistake.
The individuals who did this outside the scope of their authority. There obviously was a tremendous mistake made, and what compounded the mistake was the attempt to try to cover up. That is unacceptable in any government. These things unfortunately happen. We want to make sure that those who are responsible are punished.
Let's bring in James Carafano, the Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. James, do you buy it? Do you believe them?
Well, here's where it all gets a bit Game of Thrones, because, I don't know the truth of what happened, and we'll see what the Saudis spin out. But the Saudis have to know whatever story they put on the table is going to be measured by the U.S. government against what the Turks put on the table, and also what we have from our own U.S. intelligence. And here's what's important for the administration. Let's just say the administration said, oh, we're just going to accept the Saudi story. What Congress is going to want to hear is not just the evidence and our evaluation of the Saudi story that it's credible, but they're also going to want to know what's in U.S. intelligence. And if the Republicans lose the House and the House is controlled by the Democrats, they're going to investigate this very, very closely. And they're not going to investigate it saying, well, they're going to look at how, we can go after the president here. So the administration has to, everybody's going to be held accountable here one way or another.
And the president has called what we heard just there from the foreign minister a good first step. Do you think this story is credible to President Trump?
Well, the president said things on both sides of this. He says, well, this sounds right. This is a good first step. But he also says, I'm not necessarily sure I buy this whole explanation. But remember, the Congress isn't going to seriously look at this till they come back in November. And then the administration is going to have a credible analysis, because and it's going to have to measure up against our intel and a fair assessment of what the Saudis say. And
maybe we can fill in some gaping holes in this story, like where is the body, for instance. There are ramifications of all this and punishment. What do you think that should be? Should it be sanctions on particular individuals, or a stopping of weapons sales and arms to Saudi Arabia, as Rand Paul suggests? Listen.
That's a great question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Analyzing what this administration has done in the past in similar kinds of situations, what this administration tends to do is go after sanctioning specific individuals as opposed to a blanket punishment for the entire country. So I would expect, and they already have a vehicle in place in this with the Magnitsky Act, that they will go after specific individuals.
Including Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince?
Well, this is a really good point. What we have to assess is not just what happened, but that when we know what happened and who's culpable, how the Saudi government treats that. And that's going to play into our response. So let's say, for example, that they say, well, these 18 people did this and we can prove that, and they throw them in prison. Well, we can sanction those 18 people, but they're in prison. But, in terms of what other people in the country are culpable, it's going to get to what can we actually prove, as opposed to who do we think did this and who do we want to punish.
And the last thing, I want to play a Rand Paul soundbite and get your response.
I think we should never sell arms to any country unless it's in our national security interests. I think the war in Yemen actually increases our national risks. It makes us less secure in the Middle East. It makes us more likely to be involved in another war in Yemen.
But, James, do you think that could reverberate and maybe Saudi Arabia then gets their arms from Russia and China?
Well, look, I have a lot of respect for Senator Paul, but on this point, he is dead wrong. What Iran is trying to do in Yemen is to use the Houthis to create a new Hezbollah, a new permanent terrorist group that's there to terrorize everybody in the region. So, he may have issues with how the Yemen war is fought. I may have issues with how the Yemen... But the real threat here is we can wind up with another Hezbollah, and that will make the Middle East a living hell, and that is not in U.S. interests.
James Carafano, thank you.